Hello everyone and welcome to this digital presentation. My name is Harsirat Kaur and today we are going to dive deep into critical aspects of early childhood education, navigating inequality, equality and equity in the early years. So this presentation is a core requirement of the subject, especially focusing on how inclusive languages and learning environments shape our daily teaching practices. As educators, leaders, and advocates, the way we structure our classrooms and the words we choose have an immediate impact on a child's sense of belonging. Over the next 10 minutes, we will unpack how these structural concepts move away from abstract theory and transform into intentional real world actions that support every single child from the very start of the educational journey. So in slide 2, defining the core framework, I'm going to talk about the core framework. To understand this topic, we must first define what a core framework looks like within early childhood education. So true inclusion goes far beyond simply inviting diverse children into a mainstream space. It requires what we call transformative inclusion. Historically, standardized models of schooling expected children to fit in pre-existing mold regardless of their background. However, contemporary educational practices shifts this narrative by prioritizing genuine social justice as outlined in the file of this assessment. Establishing a strong definition of your topic is the critical first step in analyzing how inclusion functions in higher education and early learning context. True inclusion means changing the environment to suit the children rather than forcing children to assimilate into an inflexible system. We must intentionally move away from tokenistic celebrations of diversity and instead critically alter our everyday pedagogies to dismantle structural barriers. So in slide 3, I'm going to talk about decoding key terms, inequality and equality. So let's decode our first two key terms, inequality and equality. So in early childhood settings, inequality shows up as an uneven distribution of resources, power and opportunities. This isn't about funding. It includes structural defects like lack of diverse educational tools or minimal representation of minor groups. Now, many educators try to fix this by applying equality, giving very single child the exact same resources or treatment. While equality sounds fair on paper, it relies on the flawed assumption that all children start from a level playing field. If we give the exact same English literacy workbook to a child fluent in English and to a child who speaks English as an additional language, we are treating them equally, but we are completely ignoring their pre-existing barriers. This uniform approach fails to achieve fair educational outcomes. I'm going to talk about decoding key term equity in my slide 4. So this brings us to our third core term, equity. Equity is the deliberate targeted allocation of resources and modifications based on explicitly on individuals' needs to achieve fair outcomes. The core distinction here is that while equality focuses on uniform inputs, equality targets fair outputs. We are not trying to treat everyone the same. We are trying to give everyone what they need to succeed. This directly aligns with the updated Australian Early Years Learning Framework, which mandates that our curriculum decisions must intentionally account for child's social, cultural, linguistic, and physical realities. By focusing on equity, we move past the illusion of the level playing field and actively design pathways that foster authentic belongings for every child in our care. In slide 5, I'm going to tell you about connecting concepts to inclusive environment. Now, How do these concepts connect to creating a truly inclusive environment? An inclusive environment is much more than just the physical layout of a room, a row of cubbies, or a wheelchair ramp. It encompasses relational patterns, emotional safety, and our pedagogical altitudes. To build equity, we need to aim for participatory parity. This means structuring our classrooms so that all families, regardless of their migration history, home language, or socio-economic class, are valued as genuine contributors to our daily routines. Furthermore, a supportive environment provides the predictability and emotional security necessary for neurodivergent children or those experiencing significant adversity to self-regulate, ensuring they feel structurally supported that rather than isolated or tolerated. In slide 3, I'm going to talk about real world evidence inequality in practice. To see how inequality manifests in practice, we have to look closely at the hidden barriers and representing gaps that exist in everyday settings. As emphasized in this assessment, digital presentation, guidelines grounding our discussion in real world examples and current literature is vital for a high quality analysis. For instance, recent research from 2025 shows that disability representation in children's picture books remains virtually non-existent. When children look at classroom bookshelves and never see characters with a physical or neurological differences, it sends a systemic message that their lived experience lacks social value. Similarly, when staff take a class evasive approach, ignoring socio-economic differences and assuming every family has the same access to time and resource outside of the school, they reinforce underlying resource inequalities rather than solving them. In my slide 7, it's about real world evidence shifting from equality to equity. To shift from equality to equity in a practical way, we must look at concrete classroom inventions. Instead of distributing the exact same book to every during a large group reading session, an equitable educator changes their strategy. They use targeted tactile props, visual storytelling, cards, arrays, and dual language keywords to support English as an additional language learners, ensuring they can actively participate alongside their peers. Another powerful example involves sensory transition equity. Instead of expecting an autistic child to move between learning spaces at the exact same time and pace as a large group, educators can implement individualized visual schedules, pre-planned sensory micro breaks, and noise-cancelling headphones to prevent sensory overload and preserve the child's dignity. In my slide 8, critical reflection, the power of language. As we begin to wrap up, let's engage in critical reflection on the immense power of language. Language functions as an invisible architecture of power in early childhood settings. As noted in the grading criteria from this assessment, a top-tier presentation must critically demonstrate how language choice either reinforces biases or promotes inclusivity. When we use defector-based labeling, we mistakenly position a child's differences as internal flaws that needs to be cured, rather than recognizing them as a normal variation of human diversity. Casual remarks, rigid cultural assumptions, and medicalized labels create subtle hierarchies that marginalize children. Reclaiming our language and shifting to a strength-based model completely alters a child's sense of agency. validating their home language and identity as their true assets. In conclusion, in slide 9, understanding that deep connection between language, equality, and learning environments is a critical mandate for early childhood educators. We cannot choose to be a passively neutral, remaining silent, or adopting colorblind and class evasive teaching styles leaves unequal structures completely intact. Because young children observe differences and structural adaptations directly shape their emerging identities and their lifelong concepts of fairness. As the Assessment 1 overview reminds us, our reflection must be backed by research and professional standards, show that inclusive practice is an absolute professional obligation. Deploying equitable pedagogy is just not an optional teaching style, it is the foundation of true social justice. Please find on the final slide the comprehensive list of references utilized through this digital presentation. It includes our core prescribed text alongside recent peer-reviewed journal articles and contemporary educational news reporting from 2021 onwards. These sources form the evidence-based foundations for our discussion on equality and inclusive language within early childhood environments. Thank you very much for listening.